It wasn't China. It wasn't Europe. It was Canada, America's closest ally, who just hit back hard in a move that stunned Washington and caught Trump's camp completely off guard. Canada announced a sweeping 50% tariff on $22 billion, 0 cents, worth of U.S. goods. No leaks, no warnings, just a press release that landed like a diplomatic bomb. From auto parts to agricultural exports, the tariff strikes at the core of America's trade engine. And it's personal. Because while Trump has built his campaign around America first, this may be the first time one of America's oldest partners is saying, "Not this time." This isn't a trade tweak, it's a trade message. And the world just watched Canada send it directly to Donald Trump's doorstep. For years, the U.S. and Canada have maintained one of the smoothest trade relationships on the planet. Deeply integrated, highly coordinated, and politically stable. But that balance started to shift when Donald Trump re-emerged on the political scene in late 2024, reviving threats of tariffs, repealing climate-angling trade deals, and taking aim at America's trading partners under the slogan, "No more one-sided deals." Canada, once cautious and measured in its responses, has taken a sharp turn. Citing what it called unfair and escalating trade pressure from Washington, the Canadian government imposed a 50% tariff on a targeted list of U.S. imports worth over $22 billion, 0 cents. That list includes vehicle parts, grains, industrial steel, and certain categories of electronics, goods tied directly to U.S. swing state economies. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's office didn't mince words. The move, they said, was a necessary defensive action. But it's also symbolic, signaling that Canada won't sit quietly while Trump threatens tariffs, dismantles agreements, and tries to strong-arm allies into silence. This isn't just about economics, it's about respect, leverage, and timing, all unfolding as both countries inch toward pivotal elections. And now, North America's friendliest border may be entering its coldest economic standoff in decades. On July 8, 2025, Canada's Ministry of Finance quietly uploaded a document to its official trade portal. Within hours, headlines exploded. The notice confirmed a 50% tariff on a carefully selected portfolio of U.S. goods, valued at $22 billion, 0 cents annually. But this wasn't random. Every item on the list was chosen for strategic pressure. The biggest hits? Vehicle parts, especially those used by U.S. automakers, assembling in the Midwest. Wheat, corn, and soybeans, all staples from red state agricultural hubs. Steel components, vital for construction and defense contracts. Even consumer electronics were tagged, specifically imports tied to U.S. tech brands. Canada framed the tariff as a direct response to Trump's renewed threats to tear up trade agreements and reimpose tariffs on aluminum and dairy, two of Canada's most protected sectors. But insiders say this wasn't just tit for tat, it was preemptive positioning. With Trump gaining ground in polls and hinting at NAFTA-style renegotiations too, Ottawa moved first, drawing a line in the sand while signaling strength to its domestic base. And unlike the chaotic trade spats of 2018, this was calculated. A clean 50% hit, backed by legal justifications, and aimed to hurt, without blowing up the entire trade framework. The immediate fallout from Canada's tariff hit key American industries with surgical precision. Midwestern auto manufacturers, already facing supply chain strain, now face steep costs on cross-border parts critical for final assembly. According to the U.S. Auto Association, over $6 billion, 0 cents, in U.S. auto exports to Canada are directly affected, potentially delaying production timelines and increasing sticker prices. Agriculture was next in line. Corn and soybean growers, especially in Iowa, Nebraska, and Kansas, depend on Canadian buyers. With 50% tariffs now applied, Canadian importers are pivoting to Brazil and Argentina, pushing U.S. farmers into a potential price war at the worst possible time. Steel and industrial materials, often exported from Pennsylvania and Ohio, were also hit. These components feed directly into Canada's growing infrastructure and defense contracts, and the new tariffs will either price American suppliers out or force them to eat the cost. Retail may feel it too. Canadian importers of U.S. electronics and appliances have already warned of price hikes or product substitutions as margins shrink. This isn't just economic discomfort. It's a targeted blow to sectors that form the backbone of U.S. exports, and many of them sit in swing states critical to Trump's 2024 comeback strategy. To call this move just a tariff would miss the point entirely. Canada's 50% levy isn't simply about trade, it's about positioning, deterrence, and political timing. While the Trudeau administration framed it as a defensive measure, insiders suggest something more calculated, a geopolitical message in economic form. First, it's a warning shot. Canada is making it clear that if Trump returns to power and reopens trade wars, there will be consequences, fast and direct. Second, the timing couldn't be more strategic. With both nations entering election cycles, Canada's leadership is under pressure to look tough on U.S. overreach, especially after years of absorbing tariffs and renegotiating under duress. There's also a message to other U.S. allies. If Canada, historically the U.S.'s closest trading partner, is willing to hit back this hard, others might follow. Think Mexico. Think the EU. Economically, the targeted nature of the tariffs gives Ottawa leverage without causing self-harm. Politically, it energizes a Canadian electorate frustrated by repeated American policy shifts that disrupt cross-border industries. This wasn't an emotional decision. It was a strategic chess move, and Trump wasn't the one who made it. The response from Trump's camp was immediate and defensive. Within hours of Canada's announcement, Trump took to Truth Social, calling the tariff a betrayal by a weak leader, pandering to globalists, and threatening severe consequences if this isn't reversed. But behind the fiery rhetoric, insiders say the campaign was caught completely off guard. Why? Because Canada wasn't supposed to be the one pushing back. For months, Trump had focused his trade firepower on China, the EU, and Mexico, assuming allies like Canada would stay in line. Instead, Ottawa flipped the script. And now, Washington faces a difficult question: retaliate and risk escalating with a major trading partner, or de-escalate and look soft. The Biden administration, still in office until January 2025, has tried to play it cool, calling for dialogue and restraint, but privately, officials are concerned. The tariffs hit at a politically sensitive time, just as Trump is gaining traction in blue-collar swing states. Behind the scenes, U.S. trade advisors are weighing countermeasures, but anything too aggressive could spook markets or fracture NAFTA-era trade gains. This isn't just a diplomatic headache, it's a strategic puzzle. And for now, Trump is loud, but not yet in control of the board. Canada's move may have started as a bilateral jab, but its ripple effects are quickly going global. Mexico, watching closely, has expressed concern over Trump's threats to impose similar tariffs on Mexican steel and auto exports. Trade officials in Mexico City are now reviewing retaliatory options, with rumors of a selective corn and beef tax being floated as leverage. The European Union, which had its own tariff showdown with Trump during his first term, issued a sharp statement calling for measured response while quietly reviewing its 2020 counter-tariff framework, just in case a wider trade war reignites. South Korea and Japan, key allies and U.S. defense partners, have remained quiet publicly, but are reportedly conducting internal impact assessments. Many of their exports pass through U.S. supply chains that now risk instability from retaliatory trade moves. Global investors are also nervous. U.S. export-heavy sectors dipped after the Canadian announcement, and Wall Street analysts are warning of a renewed era of economic nationalism that could fracture already delicate global trade routes. This is no longer just about $22 billion 0 cents. It's about the fear that U.S. allies may start pushing back, harder and more often. And once one ally breaks the silence, others rarely stay quiet for long. This isn't just a tariff story, it's a turning point. Canada's $22 billion 0 cent strike is more than numbers. It's a signal. A signal that the era of quiet cooperation is over. That even allies are no longer willing to absorb economic punches in silence. And perhaps most significantly, that Trump's old playbook may not work the same way twice. The U.S. isn't facing one trade rival, it's facing a coalition of frustrated partners who've spent years preparing for this moment. From Canada to Europe, from Asia to Latin America, the mood is shifting from patience to posture. Trump built his brand on disrupting the system, but now the system is learning how to hit back, selectively, strategically, and on their own terms. The question isn't whether America is strong. It is. The question is, how many more of its closest partners are willing to challenge that strength, and how far will they go to protect their own sovereignty? Because when even your neighbors start drawing red lines, you're not just leading a country, you're managing a global reaction.